There's plans well underway to build what they call a spaceport on one of the Shetland Islands. It's going to be a first in the UK, in the United Kingdom of Great Britain, a place for launching rockets into space. And as is always the case when there's a development planned anywhere, especially on an archaeologically sensitive place like the Shetland archipelago, archaeologists are sent in first to check the spot to see if there's anything of value there. Not monetary value, but historical and archaeological significance. And sure enough, it being Shetland, what the archaeologists have found, where the spaceport will shortly sit, it's the remains of what is a cremation cemetery, dating back to more than 4,000 years ago, right back into the Bronze Age. It's at a place in Shetland called Saxavord, on the island of Unst, and archaeologists have been watching it, keeping an eye on what's being revealed there. There's all sorts. It was known to be, like everywhere else on Shetland, there's Viking material there or thereabouts. It was also used in the Second World War by the RAF. But the significant archaeological discovery of late is burnt bone inside a curved setting of natural granite boulders. They're natural boulders, but they've been moved into a curve. And the burnt bone, human bone, the leftovers from cremation ceremonies, has been buried in pits in this area set aside by the boulders. There's also a platform, a surface of white quartz pebbles. All of it's fascinating, all of it's evocative. It's dealing with death, and the ways of dealing with death have evolved down through the millennia. What it says, though, the reason it got into my head was I often say, and I've heard myself saying for months and years now, that there's nothing new under the sun. It's the whole premise of the podcast series here, is that whatever's going on now has probably got an echo in the past. And time and again, we're reminded that whatever it is we have in mind in our time, the ancestors got there first, or else a challenge that we face in our time turns out to have been faced before by the ancestors in their time. And I was immediately struck by this piece, because when you think about it, it means that where people 4,000 and more years ago decided to send the spirits of their ancestors into infinity, we will fire rockets into space. It's two different manifestations of the same inspiration. We belong out there. Let's go. So, as I say, nothing new under the sun, or indeed in the cosmos, as it turns out. And this is one of those thought pieces, really, where my mind wanders a bit. So bear with me. But it's a string of thoughts. I started thinking as well about what American author Tom Wolfe called the right stuff in a book of the same name. It was all about the test pilots and the early astronauts of what goes down in history as the Mercury and then the Apollo programs by the United States of America. Tom Wolfe's right stuff, it wasn't his idea. It was something he was, he heard about. It was about a quality that was desirable in the best aviators, the best test pilots that were pushing the envelope, pushing newly designed aircraft to destruction, literally. However naturally smart and well educated these men, and they were all men, were, some of them, and only some of them, reacted instantly and instinctively in the worst situations without having to think about how or why. They just instantly did something in response to a set of circumstances, and invariably it saved them. It saved them, it saved others, it saved their aircraft. And the right stuff was something you couldn't teach. You can't put in what nature's left out. But the aviators were aware of the right stuff. And so it is this without having to pause, knowing the right thing to do. It's like a physical manifestation of the truth. I talk a lot about the truth now and the necessity to say it. And the truth and the right stuff together as the same thing, they rise up from within. Like you could imagine, like clear water, cool water from a spring deep underground. So that we don't create the truth. And those aviators didn't make themselves perform the right stuff. Both just came up through them, like lightning through a lightning rod. And the truth is instinctive. We know the truth without having to think about it. That's the defining characteristic of the truth. It's just true. And another analogy or another example, if you're sitting around a table with friends, having a meal or whatever, and there's good chat going on, and suddenly you hear yourself delivering a line, and it makes everyone laugh, big laugh out loud. And sometimes if you bother to think about it, you realise that the line came to you so fast that there was no way you thought it up. It was too instantaneous. It's as though it came from somewhere else fully formed. And it made everyone laugh, because the best of jokes, the best observations make people laugh because apart from anything else, they're true. It's the truth that makes you laugh. Having something pointed out to you that is true and you know it. And the events of the last 3 years, I would say, have revealed to more and more people every day that our civilization, our society, whatever, has lost its way. We're being deviated away from the truth. We're being diverted away from the truth. Or perhaps it's more accurate to say that our society has been deliberately driven off course by those with malign intentions, those with the desire, the ancient desire to take control of everything and everyone. Over the millennia, it's been attempted again and again to get a grip of the whole thing by a handful of people. So our ancestors faced tyrants and demagogues, kings and emperors of vaulting ambition. But on account of the technology that's available now, total control is a realistic ambition for the first time. They can do it now because of the internet and the rest of the digitised technologies. And people say to me all the time, in the face of all this trauma that's going on, in the face of all this anxiety, they say, okay, we get the problem, we understand, you've talked about it till you're blue in the face, but what are we supposed to do? You stop telling us the problem, we understand, what's the solution? And I think about that, and I believe it's time to think the unthinkable, just as our ancestors did from time to time. And sometimes thinking the unthinkable is also very closely related, if not the same thing, as just thinking of something for the first time. Thinking of something that hasn't hitherto been needed, but's needed now. Most people have an instinct to go with the flow. It's there in all of us, really. It varies the extent to which people want to submit to that instinct, but it's there. You know, that feeling that you want to walk with the herd, go where everyone else is going, do what everyone else is doing. And for a lot of the time, for herd animals, it's a useful instinct because it protects you from predators. If you're a sheep or a cow, if you're in a school of fish, it makes sense to get deep inside it because you're less likely to get picked off by wolves or sharks or whatever it is that's nipping at the outside. But from time to time, it's the herd that's walking into danger altogether, towards the cliff edge. Or perhaps more sinister, that the shepherds or the cowherds are leading the herd to the slaughterhouse and the herd is all unknowing. Sometimes if you want to survive, you have to think the unthinkable and then as a consequence do what might feel like the undoable, that which cannot be done, but it has to be done. We've all grown up expecting the state to do the necessary things, provide education for children, to provide healthcare for us, our families, to keep us safe from outsiders, from criminals and crime, and to do the basic stuff like keep the power on and the streets clean and the bins emptied and to make sure there's food in the shops. And underneath it all, we expect the state to have our best interests at heart. And, you know, too many of us, for too much of the time, assume that the state has our best interests at heart. But sometimes sometimes the state turns on the people. Sometimes the state, the powers that be, disregard the people in pursuit of aims beneficial only to the few people running the show. And when that happens, it's time to think the unthinkable and to do the undoable. Another indication that it's time to think the unthinkable and do the undoable is the fact so many people out there are demonstrably unconcerned about being lied to. The lying by the state is obvious now. It's not even being effectively denied or disguised. And those of us who care about being lied to, who care about the truth, are absolutely obliged now to act in defence of the truth, to live by the truth. I said this was a string of thoughts. Let's get back to those ancestors on Shetland. For the longest time, the ancestors here in Britain and elsewhere, the first farmers, the Neolithic people, they were in the habit of placing the bodies of their dead inside stone tombs that they built from the bedrock. And sometimes they left the bodies outside until the flesh was picked away by scavengers and birds and whatever, leaving only the bones that could be collected together and placed inside the tombs in piles. Other times they put the bodies inside as they were and let them decay in there. And it was that way for the longest time. That was how death was dealt with for thousands of years. And then, and for reasons archaeologists can't fully explain and can only theorise about, everything changed. And instead of gathering the dead into the tombs, they began placing the dead on pyres and setting them alight to burn to ashes. Now, talk about thinking the unthinkable. It can only have been a revolutionary idea, especially the first time you saw it happen. You're going to do what? Dad's died, and what? You're going to set fire to the body? It's a revolutionary idea. So it may have been linked, though, to a new idea about the existence of a place of spirits, a heaven up in the sky. The thought occurred to someone that there was somewhere invisible that the souls of the dead went, which explained why you couldn't see them or talk to them anymore. They'd gone somewhere that you couldn't go because you were still alive. And maybe that concept, that inspiration led to the idea that to get there, you could help them on their way by transforming the loved body from flesh and blood into something that could rise up into the sky, which is smoke. And that change from burial inside tombs to cremation was a consequence of thinking differently, thinking something that had never been thought before. An altogether novel solution to a problem, you might say. Now, in the 21st century, rocket scientists have chosen as the site for firing their rockets into the sky the same patch of ground that was chosen by Bronze Age ancestors for sending spirits into heaven. Now, it's only a coincidence, of course, but it's still a reminder of how whatever we think of doing has usually been tried one way or another sometime before. I've mentioned that it was an RAF base during World War II, and it was. Aspera ad astra, which means by endeavour to the stars, is the motto of the Royal Air Force. That place being developed as a spaceport at Saxe-Voord on Shetland was RAF territory and property. So around and around it goes, by endeavour to the stars. If we try hard enough, we can get up there. Ad astra is Latin, and it has its origins, it would appear. The first time we can see it used is with the poet Virgil, who wrote in the Aeneid, "Thus one journeys to the stars." And also Seneca the Younger, another writer, wrote in Hercules, "Non est ad astra mollis aeteris via." There's no easy way from the earth to the stars. There is no easy way from the earth to the stars. Now, more recently, the site at Saxe-Voord has been used as a radar station, and as of 2019, it's been fully operational again as a radar. It was briefly closed earlier this century, but it's back again, fully operational. And the new station's motto is Praemonio de Periculis, premonition of peril. Premonition of peril. And if you don't have a premonition of peril nowadays, then I don't know where you've been. Now, there's undoubtedly a survival instinct in our species. It's always been there, or we wouldn't be here. There have always been those who've had premonitions of peril. And there have always been those with the right stuff that enabled them, without thinking it, to get the hell out of Dodge before the worst happened. The Right Stuff by Tom Wolfe was a way of describing the manifestation of that instinct. Now, more and more people are having that survival instinct triggered every day. And when you feel it, you act. You can't not. Whatever has to be done, has to be done. It needs no thought, it needs no filtering, because it comes from the same place as the truth. The truth moves through us and we feel it. And it makes us do things if we let it. This feels like a time to think the unthinkable, which at this moment in time means starting again with fresh ideas, changing the way we've always done things, like burying in the Neolithic, to cremation as the Bronze Age came on. New ideas. We need better ways now of educating children, because they're not being educated anymore, they're being indoctrinated. And we need better approaches to living healthy lives. Instead of being made sick by the military-industrial complex, aided and abetted by the medical-industrial complex, we've been trained to just think we can do what we like, get sick, and then take a pill or a potion. We need to get away from that. We need to rebuild communities where people take care of themselves and each other with minimal interference from the state. That's an old idea. We don't need all this top-down centralised stuff. We need grassroots up organisation from within the people living those lives. And all of it might feel undoable. You might think, we can't start again. That's unthinkable. We can't turn our backs on everything that's been the work of our parents and grandparents and so on and so on and so on. And so it feels undoable, but it can be done because people have changed and found new ways of doing things in response to the truth before. And it is time to do it all again. There's just no getting away from the fact that it's time to think the unthinkable, and where necessary to do what feels undoable. It can all be done.